of revenue in this country so that they could fund foreign wars for the monarchy in England. And what we see is that we wanted some way to prevent this. You have, for example, James Otis, who was a lawyer in colonial Massachusetts. He was, of course, a member of the Massachusetts Provincial Assembly. He's best known for the catchphrase, "Taxation without representation is tyranny." He wrote, or rather gave a speech, I should say, I'm going to read it to you, against writs of assistance. Writs of assistance, by the way, were a specific type of general warrant that allowed customs officials to rifle through all of the possessions, both business and personal, of the colonists at will. And this is what Otis, who is a firebrand and certainly a founding father, a pamphleteer and legislator, he said that I will to my dying day oppose, with all the powers and faculties God has given me, all such instruments of slavery on the one hand and villainy on the other as this writ of assistance is. It appears to me the worst instrument of arbitrary power, the most destructive of English liberty and the fundamental principles of law that ever was found in an English law book. I must therefore beg your honor's patience and attention to the whole range of an argument that may perhaps appear uncommon in many things, as well as to points of learning that are remote and unusual. Your honors will find in the old books concerning the office of a justice of the peace precedents of general warrants to search suspected houses. But in more modern books you will find only special warrants to search such and such houses, specially named, in which the complainant has before sworn that he suspects his goods are concealed, and will find it adjudged that special warrants only are legal. He called this, remember, special warrants or general warrants. I'm sorry, not special warrants, general warrants or writs of assistance. The, quote, worst instrument of arbitrary power, the most destructive of liberty. They took this stuff seriously because, as you know, as you've already seen in recent years, if you give government agencies power to go through your stuff, they will do so to justify their existence. They will do so because they can. They will do so because those who wield power always want to do so more rather than less. And we see this now playing out. Like I said, I'm somewhat astonished that there even had to be this case brought. Even more astonished that people who are sworn to uphold the law couldn't figure out for themselves that there was something inherently different about going through the entire contents of a cell phone subsequent to arrest. This comes to us straight from English common law, this whole concept that there have to be limitations imposed upon government officers and what they can look through. This is really at the foundation of our founding. So you have James Otis, but even before Otis, there was John Wilkes of England. He was a libertine, a journalist, a debaucher, a ribald, a duel fighter, an all-around naughty guy. I just wrote a bunch of those words down so I'd remember them. Ribald is fun to say. He's the publisher of the North Briton newspaper. He wrote all kinds of libelous, scandalous things. And he wrote something that was known as the North Briton. And in issue number 45 of it, he made the mistake, from the perspective of the Crown, of mocking the king. So he is someone who decided to go after power. He's somebody who poked the beast, if you will, went after the Leviathan. And this caused many issues for him. So he wrote that a despotic minister will always endeavor to dazzle the prince with high-flown ideas of the prerogative and honor of the crown. I wish as much as any man in the kingdom to see the honor of the crown maintained in a manner truly becoming royalty. I lament to see it sunk even to prostitution. What he's referring to is that the king's speech was on this elevated plane, yet the king always spoke through ministers. What's up with that, he was saying. Well, the king decided to set up a general warrant and seize anybody involved in this publication, to seize all their effects, to seize their persons. And after this, there was a series of struggles back and forth. This is a very brief version of the trials and tribulations of John Wilkes of England. But there were efforts to crush him by the crown for speaking out, and they relied upon general warrants. He was found guilty of seditious libel. He was kicked out of Parliament. He became a hero, by the way, to the colonials here in this country. In fact, a number of towns, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, bears his name. And I believe Wilkesboro, is it North or South Carolina? I know one of you knows. Also bears his name. It was important then that the king couldn't just go through all your stuff. And it's important now that the federal Leviathan with President Obama at the top can't go through all your stuff as well. A small step for liberty today, but a necessary one. More on all this in just a minute.
Buck Sexton, the Blaze Radio Network.
What team are you on? Get your Team Buck shirt now at theblaze.com.
So the police, the 5-0, they can't just go through your pockets anymore, take your phone out and look at photos you have of your significant other, your girlfriend, whatever, boyfriend. They can't just look through all your stuff. But the fight continues on, my friends. They will find more and more ways to intrude even deeper into your life, and you will just live in a constant state of either ignorance or anxiety. Ignorance of a law, and therefore you think that you're safe because you're not doing anything wrong. Oh, no, everything's great. Or anxiety because you actually know the law and you know the nature of the government that we live under and the bureaucracy and the enforcement agents within it. And then you basically worry all the time because you know at some point your number is going to get called. And then it's just a question of how bad the damage will be to your reputation, your freedom, whatever the case may be. But the broad voice lines are open if you want to weigh in on any of this stuff today. 888-900-3393 is the number, and we shall take one from Mike in New York, a fellow New Yorker. Mike, what's going on?
Hey, Buck, how's it going?
Good.
Cool. I thought of a second point while I was on hold. I told your screener I was going to say one thing.
We like many points, sir. Go for it. What do you got?
All right. Well, I think first and foremost, I think the Supreme Court decision has really got a limited shelf life on it, and I say that because we have such a huge quote-unquote crisis brewing on our southern borders that something's bad is going to happen, and they'll just use it as an excuse to expand the Patriot Act or come up with some new act that's just going to remove that privacy anyway. And I don't know if our lack of action is designed to do such a thing. I don't know. I don't know that our fearless leader is quite that nefarious, but I hesitate to give him credit. And then the second point I was thinking was, we were talking about John Wilkes and reading what he had wrote about the prostitute point. And if you look at what was happening then and what's happening now, the king's speeches back then are now the king's will, and the prostitutes setting forth what his agenda is, it's just simply the media and his lackeys. So the situation still exists. It just exists in a different form, in a more legitimate form, in the unreasonable power that we give to the media.
Look, this is why I think it's so worthwhile for us to dive back into the history sometimes, because you see many of the same conflicts playing out, just in sort of with some different details and some time and place changes. But in terms of the principles at stake and involved, there's a tremendous amount of similarity. But you can imagine at that point in time, it was thought to be essential to the integrity of the realm and essentially national security not to criticize the king. And so they used that concept to shut down this North Britain paper and to expel Wilkes from Parliament. And look, I mean, he was a rough and tumble kind of a guy. I mean, if you look back into his background a little bit, he was involved in, I believe it was called the Hellfire Club, which they used to dress up as monks and hire prostitutes to dress up as nuns, and did things that people do when they are doing weird stuff like that. So, he was an extreme libertine. He was a guy who did not abide by the social mores of his day, or any day for that matter. But the idea that he came out and criticized the king for something that seems very legitimate. I mean, how can the word of the king be law if it's always coming through other people? Doesn't that mean that it's not the word of the king? Then that got him into a lot of trouble. And he was a hero to many of the founders. Franklin actually thought that he was a disgusting jerk, which is interesting. Benjamin Franklin thought that Wilkes was too gross and too naughty, but others...
That says a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and I was going to say, and for Franklin, it hit a little too close to home,
Maybe that's...
he was, Franklin was upset that he wasn't the only one, pinching ladies when they weren't paying attention and such. But nonetheless, that was the background on Wilkes. Did you get both your points in, Mike? Was there one more?
Oh, I did. The first one being that I think there's going to be some form of crisis occurring at the south border that's going to be used to basically negate this decision.
Well, crisis as a tool, and the creation of crisis, really false crisis, as a tool for getting policy through, because you sort of create public opinion through the creation of the crisis, is something this administration has really elevated to a sort of authoritarian art form. It's amazing to see. We're in a climate crisis. We're in an immigration crisis. We're not in apparently a debt crisis. We're not in a jobs crisis.
Clearly not.
We're not in a national security, international relations crisis. No, that's all stuff. We're in a fair pay crisis. We're in a racial and gender equity crisis.
Right. It's
always
all the wedge issues that become crises, and the worst part of it is the what are they calling that? Not the rule of law. What's that thing they like to? Social justice is replacing the rule of law, and I think that a tremendous amount of that's through the crisis manipulation. You see the president more angry about Trayvon Martin than he is about the Marine in the Mexican jail, and it's by creating divisions and by creating the social injustices. And people forget that these I keep drawing a blank on what I was calling it. The social justice is really just whim, and we have to be careful. It's a slippery slope because Jim Crow was social justice.
Yeah, well, whatever they say it is what it's supposed to be, and they use fear and intimidation and accusations of either racism or sexism or whatever in order to silence the opposition. Mike from New York, my friend, thank you very much for calling in. Good to hear from you. Mike mentioned Sergeant Tamarisi, by the way, and I do have an update. This is from, I just want to make sure that you probably have not. Yeah, this is just from today, and it was sent to me by, actually, you know what? We're going to put a pin in that because I'm going to see if we can get somebody to call in to give us a little update on Sergeant Tamarisi and what's going on with him in Mexico. So hold that thought, everybody. The call-in is 888-900-3393. The broad voice lines are open. I'm going to work some of my magic here in the Freedom Hut. I should have something interesting in just a minute.
Let your voice be heard.
Hello.
888-900-3393.
Buck Sexton Show.
On the Blaze Radio Network.
Phone the Sexton hotline, 888-900-3393.
Sergeant Tamarisi is still behind bars in Mexico. As of today, the VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, has called for a boycott until Mexico releases him. This is the latest. The Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States is calling for a nationwide boycott of Mexican products and travel until Marine Sergeant Andrew Tamarisi is released from a Mexican jail. Quote, this combat Marine has been languishing away since he was arrested March 31st for allegedly crossing the border accidentally with 3 personal firearms that were legally registered in the United States but not in Mexico, said VFW National Commander William Thien. It was a mistake, but so is the Mexican government's reluctance to release him back unharmed into the United States. Well, with the latest on this, I'm joined now by Bart Santos. He's a private investigator who is working diligently on the case and trying to help the Tamarisi family get Andrew back. Bart, thank you for calling in.
Thanks for having me, Buck.
Bart, what can you tell us, everything that you can about Andrew's status right now? What are you hearing about the effort to get him released? How helpful is this VFW posting? I mean, just try to bring us as up to speed as you can.
Well, just first, Andrew himself is doing okay. I have talked to him a few times.